Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you're not aware, Core Recruitment is an international recruitment company, and we operate across the globe for mid to senior level recruitment for exec and non-exec positions across hospitality, leisure, and retail. Now, we're running this interview series to basically infuse some positivity into the marketplace. And we're speaking to some really amazing business founders, leaders, and people that are doing really interesting things within our sector. Now, we're really lucky today to be joined by Harry Apostolides, who is the founder of C'est La Vie Group. And I'm just going to open up with this because I've been to multiple of your venues, Harry. I mean, you're never opening in a basement, are you? I mean, this is kind of like, this is a thing. There's definitely like, a theme that seems to happen with your
Never.
establishments where they're big and they're on rooftops and they're in very impressive venues, right?
So, look, one of the brand pillars is extraordinary views, and we certainly do have them in a lot of our venues. I think of the current operations that we have, the lowest altitude is level 17, which is actually in London, but we are on the 57th level in Singapore, 54 in Dubai. So we're really up there. We're elevated for sure.
I mean, the venues are stunning. I mean, especially we've held multiple brunches at the one in Dubai itself, which is just absolutely amazing. But for those who live at ground level and have
Sure.
not been kind of like into C'est La Vie before, can you just give us a little bit about the business and what you guys do?
Sure. So we've been around for 16 years. We opened our first venue at Marina Bay Sands here in Singapore back in 2009. So we've been trading there for almost 16 years now. Hospitality years are even longer than dog years actually. So 16-year restaurant and nightclub business in one particular location is quite an achievement, something that we're very proud of. We opened that venue 2009. We now have venues in Dubai, Tokyo, Taipei, London, and later this year we'll be opening in Miami and Belgrade, and early next year in Abu Dhabi. A little bit about the brand. We are very much a lifestyle brand. A lot of food and beverage operators do say that, but we really do marry culinary, design, experience, and view into one special experience. And we've been around for a long time. The company has recently undergone a change of primary ownership. So our majority shareholder now is the IHC Group out of Abu Dhabi, and that is a very large conglomerate that's based in the UAE. And we've just come out of ownership from private equity. And so there's a real change in the culture that we've been able to experience and deliver recently.
Excellent. Now, the venues that you find are incredible venues, and like, whenever you walk in, it's a take your breath away kind of moment. How do you find these properties, and do you know instantly when you walk in somewhere if it's a C'est La Vie venue or not?
I think that now, I mean, look, we have opened some venues and have had to close them, for a variety of different reasons. Poor business performance being clearly the most fundamental. And, over a series of years, I've become to understand what makes for a good venue and, what is just not going to work for us. I think that, one of the biggest challenges in venues like ours is, not to find yourself in a location that just becomes one of these typical tourist traps. Got a great view, but, can be a little bit soulless. Um, I'll give you a little bit of an example. Here in Singapore, for example, we are in a Moshe Shafti design building. He's a very prominent Israeli architect, and he created some folding windows, on the 57th level of the building, which can be opened and closed to create al fresco dining. We were fortunate enough to be approached by the Emar Group for the address Skyview, and they had a building also designed by Moshe Shafti. And I walked into it. It was a beautiful space overlooking the Burj Khalifa,
Mm.
double-story windows. but it was enclosed. It had a very distinct indoor and outdoor space. So what we did is we went to the team from EMAR and we said, look, we want to create an al fresco dining experience here. So we punched out all the windows at great expense. And and you visited the venue, so I think that you've probably experienced that. So that we do have this interface with the indoor and outdoor spaces, which really gives people connection with the view. So they're not just looking at the view, they are soaking up the atmosphere and the energy that comes with being in a great space like this. And it just makes for far more interesting and enjoyable dining.
Excellent. Now, Miami, I speak to so many clients at the moment that are looking at getting into Miami and finding Miami, and there's lots of discussion over, is it South Beach, is it Brickell, where should they be opening, all of that kind of side of things. These are big venues. I'm sure the capex and the investment and all of that kind of stuff is absolutely massive. And you must be thinking 3, 5, 10 years ahead in terms of like, what's going to be performing. When you're going into a market which is as, I don't want to say congested, but there's a lot of competition in Miami, right? There's a lot
Sure.
of money in Miami too, but I'm sure there's a lot of
Yeah.
competition. Like, how are you choosing the venue and like, and competition wise, kind of like, what do you think the opportunities and threats are with Miami at the moment?
Look, it is a very crowded market for sure. Costs have really escalated there as well. It's really, we're going through the process of design development at this point in time and some value engineering to see if we can, bring the cost down to a more reasonable level. But the investment's a significant one. We've got a good sized space, a little under 10,000 square feet on top of the W in Brickell. So it's a great space. It's part of the Icon development there. Um, Look, we've got a great landlord there, a terrific space. It does have a pool within it as well. It's got some legacy. People have been to this particular venue. It's traded there for a long, long time. Um, so, we're excited about the prospect of it. Also, we go in with some degradation because we know that it is a very competitive market space. There's some very, very good operators there. And we know that we have to deliver what we deliver better than anybody else. I think that we're going in with a unique product. I think that within the Brickell, environment, there's still a little bit of room for, a player like us, as much as there's been some terrific operators that have gone in there in recent times. And we've got we're starting to build together a good team of people as well. So we go through and we do a lot of study before we enter into a market. We'll engage professionals to do surveys for us. We engage with a lot of other operators. We try to find a local partner, generally speaking, in any market that we're going into because they bring a lot of knowledge into that particular trading environment. And I think that for us in the Miami market, our modern Asian concept, our unique design, and the legacy and the heritage that we bring, I think will help us stand out in the marketplace there.
Obviously, it's on a rooftop. Obviously, there's a swimming pool. Like, I mean, that might be like on the criteria list pretty high.
Mhm.
Belgrade, not a location that we hear of all the time. What's attracting you to Belgrade, and is this a market we should be looking at?
So, look, time will tell. I mean, for anybody that's listening to this at this point in time, I think we're going in a little bit early. We're an early adopter. We found a great partner that's got a number of food and beverage concepts, very successful ones in the market already. They are the preeminent operator within the Belgrade market. The building that we're going into is our landlord in Dubai, so it's Emar as well. So, that was a good fit for us.
Hmm.
So we felt that this partnership in a market, having visited Belgrade as well, there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that, you need to research it well. There's a lot of things that are attractive to going into this market. Fit out costs were not particularly high. Property costs remain relatively low. Salaries and wages are at a manageable level. So those three, you know, aspects of the business that sometimes preclude operators from,
Mm.
achieving their goals are something that we can manage. So as a result of that, we're going into this market. So watch this space. We are going in there. having done a lot of research, we're doing a lot of advanced planning. We've got some extraordinary designs that we've developed for this space. And so we think it will be something quite special, actually.
Excellent, Harry. So, I mean, I think we're all going to be going to Belgrade and trying to check out that as kind of like the next tourist destination, and you guys are going to be in there first. So, in terms of your customer demographic, I mean, yes, you guys have got amazing venues, tourist locations in the center, but your kind of like target customer demographic, I imagine, and from what I see when I'm in there, is top end, high disposable income, luxury kind of like travelers who want really great experiences. Every market at the moment is challenged and every market at the moment is being squeezed. So what trends do you expect to see for that demographic over the next 24 months?
So, I mean, I think that it's quite interesting. There's been, a significant change in consumer preferences really since the pandemic. In our business particularly, people are going out and clubbing less. A lot of operators will say people are going out less. I don't think that's the case. I just think that they're not going to restaurants and bars quite as much as they used to, looking more for um, more healthy options and the like, so we've seen some changes. So we've had to do a little bit of pivoting and, the offering that we have. We've had to change our menus and, to be able to accommodate the decrease in alcohol consumption that usually
Mhm.
happens around businesses like ours. Our club operations, though, fortunately, are still doing relatively well. And, we're really focusing on a lot of music and entertainment. But I think that over the next 24 months, given the cost pressures that people are feeling, given the uncertainty people are feeling now with the, things that are happening within the Middle East, I think that we're going to really focus on delivering value for money. We're going to be doubling down in the service elements that we have. We're going to really sort of elevate our music and entertainment offering. Feel that really, people are a lot more sophisticated in that sort of thing. Um, and the service is always going to remain central and key. We're investing a lot in our people to, ensure that they really understand, our menus, our product, our customers, the changing trends, and so that we can deliver something very, very special.
Absolutely. Now, we mentioned kind of like at the start of this interview, a year's a long time in hospitality and you've been doing it for 17. In terms of being a business leader within this sector, running a global company, doing these openings, operating at that kind of level, at that kind of standard for 17 years, this is not an easy feat. Do you know what I mean? I often look at like hospitality entrepreneurs kind of like across the sectors we operate in and think, my God, if you were working in finance or blah, 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 you would be like, everyone would have a much easier life, right? So,
Well,
like, what gives you the passion, the drive, the energy, the resilience to pick this up? And we all have dark days, right? So when you do wake up and you're like, oh, Jesus, like, what's the motivator you use to get you cracking on?
look, there's a lot of things, and that's a quite a difficult question to answer. But my first love of the hospitality industry came from hotels. I was a hotelier in my previous life. And I mean, I love that experience. And really, it was the people aspect. And I know that that just seems so cliche, but it really is. I mean, I've met and worked with some very, very interesting people, and I've just loved that experience. I think also in businesses like ours, where people go to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, engagements, and the like we are, or family get together, we are that place where people come together and celebrate something special. And, that's always been something that I've really, really enjoyed. I think also, our industry does, you know, uh, can give you very quick gratification actually as well. Little tweaks that you make to menus, to design, to layout, to processes can yield you quite interesting results. You don't have to wait 16, 18 months, rolling out a new piece of technology or whatever the case may be. I find that personally satisfying as well. And but I think that interacting with a lot of the customers as well, over the years. I used to work at this resort in the Turks and Caicos called Parakeet, and it was
Mm.
a beautiful property. And I happened to be visiting New York, and I was standing outside of a restaurant in the Soho area, and I made a point of going to every single table in both of our restaurants every single night and saying hello to guests. It was a very good and quick way to gauge and get a little bit of a temperature on how well the operation was trading and whether they were having a good time. And you quickly learn to read facial expressions and the like. If they're usually elated, and if there is a somewhat of a muted response, you know
Mm.
that maybe something's not exactly right. So I met this particular guest. I didn't recognize him when I walked by him in New York, but he stopped and said, "Hey, is your name Harry? Do you work at Parakeet?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "You changed my life." And he had done a spa program, and then he just walked off. And I thought, well, that was just a wonderful experience for me. And I just really enjoyed that. Now, in the restaurant business, we don't have that quite that sort of a thing. But this guy was down. He needed to get away. I think that he was having some situations and things happening at work, and we could offer him something that at that moment had changed his life. There's something satisfying about that, I have to say.
That's amazing. I'm Googling the spa, Como Parakeet, at the
Yeah.
moment,
I
thinking
mean,
like,
unfortunately, I'm not going to serve up a meal that's going to garner that sort of a response. But it's great to work in these sorts of environments. And there's something very special about leading a team as well. And in the hospitality industry, we do have inevitably quite large teams that work with us and for us. And I find that also very satisfying in helping develop careers and really mold a concept and deliver something very special.
yeah, because one of the things that we notice as an external provider is that kind of like the amount of longevity, the amount of career progression, the amount of people that move kind of like, within the organization is absolutely phenomenal. So, like this, like we're obviously a recruitment company, but kind of like from a kind of a retention and kind of like progression kind of like perspective, what do you kind of do which you think brings the biggest benefit to the business?
So we have working in our business people that have been with us since the opening. I think that we have 12 people that have been with us since the opening of C'est La Vie Singapore, and there's
Wow.
212 staff at that particular venue. 12, it's not a huge number, but that's a lot of people that have been working with us for a long time. I think that there's an additional 15 people that have, closed 10 years of service. So there's a lot of things, that you've got to do to create an environment where people want to stay. Um, they they have to feel proud about the workplace that they're in. So, that pride is something that we understand, and we reinvest in the product and the like, and our places are very, very special. Um, they have to have confidence as well. So confidence and pride are these two elements that are very important. The confidence comes from training, and the pride comes from setting standards and creating a culture that wants to deliver the best. And our brand is well known, and I think that people like and respect that. Um, we've managed to grow the business into, a sizable one, so they feel comfortable that, we are also going to be around for a while.
Hmm.
I think that that's important. But I think that we did a couple of things that we implemented relatively recently that have been kind of game changers for us. We've created two incentives for the team here. One is a revenue-based incentive. So if they hit the revenue targets, our budget targets for the month, 1.5% of revenue is distributed amongst the team. If we achieve guest satisfaction goals of complaints set at a fairly low level, another 1.5% of revenue is distributed amongst the team.
Wow.
So, um, And in Singapore, I think all but 1 month last year, they hit every single target. They hit every single target for service, and they hit 11 of the targets that they had out of 12. So not a bad result, actually. That incentive adds up to quite a bit of money, actually. I mean, it can add up between $6,000 and $8,000 a year. And in Singapore, if an employee is making between 2.8 and 3.5, say, that's several months of bonus there. So, we're kind of like the Goldman Sachs of the hospitality industry in certain terms of the bonuses that we offer. But can I tell you, it's a great investment. I mean, for us, I mean, we'll be dishing out just on those bonuses about $1.6 million a year. So
Wow.
it's a lot of money, but it is absolutely worth it because we've had little turnover, a significant reduction in complaints, and just generally guest satisfaction being far more improved, and profits and have soared as a consequence. So, I don't see this as an expense. I think it's as a necessary investment in what we have to do. Money isn't everything, but it's an important factor.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, we ensure that, we create a culture that, people find attractive and they just want to be part of. And my door is not open at this moment in time. We're doing this little chat. My door is always open. Um, we have staff newsletters that go out once a month, from around the group, so the team sees that they're part of a bigger package. We organize quite extensive staff retreats every year. I mean, here in Singapore, we'll take the team away to Batam or Bintan and do an overnight stay someplace. We'll spend, about $120,000 on a party to throw for the team. But there'll be award ceremonies for their recognition awards, all of those sorts of things. We have the standard employee of the month and front of house and back of house, supervisor of the quarter. And we even have a QR code based suggestion box. So scan a suggestion, you can scan a code, and you can make a suggestion to improve performance or staff welfare, whatever the case may be. So we make these investments in our people all the time.
Absolutely. That sounds absolutely incredible. That's an incredible amount of money to be paying out, but I completely understand the benefit that you kind of get back from it is incredible. One question I did want to ask kind of like a little bit about, because there's lots of companies that at the moment they're talking about AI, technology, all of these systems and processes and all of that kind of stuff that you can add in. What are you using that you find is enhancing the customer experience as well as profitability across the group currently?
Right. So, I mean, in the hospitality industry, I always have a little bit of an uncomfortable relationship with technology. I mean, a little bit old school. You and I talking before this chat about the struggles of modern IT these days.
Hmm.
But seriously, the struggle that I have sometimes is that, increasingly, our industry is becoming commoditized. You go in and there's a QR code, scan the QR code. That's where you'll see the menu, you'll order. A waiter will bring it, a dish to your table. I worry about the long-term prospects of the hotel industry, if we really are removing that very important aspect of what we do. Having said that, there's a lot of technology now that is game-changing and really can help in the decision making. We use a lot of AI at C'est La Vie, both to process, a lot of data touch points that we have. For instance, we have, implemented, the security cameras, no, not with facial recognition, but with, other things, other AI functions that help us move guest movements, gender, a lot of things like that. So we better understand what our customer base is. You and I, whenever we walk into a restaurant and look at a crowd of people, have inherent bias.
Mm.
We see the world, everyone sees the world in a slightly different view. CCTV systems, no, they see it just the way that it is actually. So it processes this data and gives us some great information about the people, our customer base. We do a lot of surveying of guests these days, and AI makes that much easier to do because, we have just coming into C'est La Vie Singapore about 2,000 people a day, coming in from basically lunchtime through to, I mean, we open from noon and we close at 4 a.m. So there's a lot of people that come in during that period of time. We survey a big chunk of those people each and every day through a QR code while they're waiting
Mm.
in the queue, how they found out about us, um, where they're from. We get some basic information like that. All of that data goes in to, create a better understanding of what our customer base is like. We do the same sort of thing with our menus as well. We look at very detail at the sort of dishes that are being consumed, more often than not. Why these, we set everything into a four-quadrant system. And we try to figure out those items that are not selling, why they're not. Is it the way that we're describing it on the menu? Is it the ingredients? Is it the pricing? So, we can tweak things, and we've developed much better menus as a result. We have a much better understanding of our customers. Our investment now in sales and marketing is far more directed at these core demographics that we are now attracting. So there's been some reinvestment in sales and marketing. There's been some adjustment in menus. And also, we've looked at, because we now better understand through AI the way customers move through our venues, we've sort of adjusted seating and couch layouts to ensure that there's a better movement of people. There was some blockages in certain areas.
Sounds like
So
you're
we
really
use it a
using it.
lot.
Yeah, enhancement definitely sounds like the way forward. And I guess kind of like on the other side of things, like from an entrepreneur perspective, like, there'll be a lot of people watching this interview who are like, oh my God, c'est la vie, that's incredible. How do you get to that stage? How do you get to that kind of level? How do you think that we encourage more entrepreneurship within hospitality? And what lessons or what advice would you give people about kind of like that global scaling side of things? Because it looks on paper like you guys went from naught to 1,000 in like 3 seconds. I'm sure there was kind of like some learnings along the way with
Oh,
that, right?
there was a lot of pain in along the way. I mean, I think first and foremost, you just have to give it a go. I mean, you have to have faith in yourself and the partners around you. And I think in the hospitality industry, it's good to have good people around you because, there are those days when you change people's lives. There are those days when, we suffer soul crushing defeats and the like. So, it's good to have some good people around. I would suggest that I think it's very important that you research very carefully, the location in which you operate, the concept that you're going to develop. Ask a lot of questions. Really, really, really understand the market that you're going into. I think these are key. You have to have a pretty thick skin because you'll be dealt disappointment, in the early days, each and every day. And sometimes, that could be you're on the precipice of huge losses, and
Mm.
that kind of keeps you up at night. So you got to have a little bit of a stomach for it. But if you've done the research and you've done the preparation and you've done the planning, those crushing moments are less likely to come. But I think that, you really just have to have a go of it. I think, it's also important that, you put a little bit of your own money into it as well. I mean, a lot of people just go out and raise, money from, lots of different friends, family members, and maybe not have some skin in the game themselves. They should understand the responsibility that comes with taking on third-party investment and the like. Um, and the one thing that you do have to understand that there's never one of these plug and play that, oh, it's great, it's sorted out, I can think about other things. The hospitality business just needs to be um, uh, monitored, 24/7. It's like one of those, is it called a Tamagotchi, those little toys that
Yeah,
used
yeah,
to
yeah, 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 yeah.
a little bit like that, you know. So, you know, you've really got to monitor it very, very carefully and very, very closely. And you need to be in the operation. You need to be at the coal face. I found out, you know, great learning. As much as you know, I went to hospitality school. You know, I do ask a lot of questions, but you know, in the businesses that I've run, I've always tried to spend a little bit of time at the coal face, you know, whether that's being at a reception desk, you know, being in the bar, working in the bar, seeing what's happening with the waiters, you know, they will give you the real feedback of, you know, what works and what doesn't work. And there you've got that great information from that you'll get from your team. So have a dream, research it, you know, and you know, you just gotta, you know, work your butt off.
And my final question, obviously, because London, I love all of my children, but kind of like London is my hometown, and I'm very passionate about London. You guys obviously
Yeah.
had a spectacular opening that you did here, kind of like last August, which has had, you know, phenomenal write-ups and all of that kind of stuff. How are you finding it? How are you finding the market here? And you opened Paddington, which is, you know, not like, you know, not the city, not like the West End, that kind of side of things. How are you finding the location?
Mhm. So, I mean, this has been a great project actually. The London market is not easy, and you know, I have to thank you guys for all your support and bringing us some great people. But the London market is not an easy one. This particular development is in Paddington Square. Paddington Square is a building that is owned by HPL, Hotel Properties Limited of Singapore, and Ong Beng Sing. I used to work for him when I was a hotelier. And he wanted to add a little Singapore flag on top of his London project. It is a beautiful project designed by Renzo Piano. It is a 50-meter long, 50-meter wide, 50-meter tall cube, by the way, and you know, built right next to Paddington Station and above a very complicated network of Royal Mail tunnels that used to run underneath there because there was a post office there. Anyway,
Wow.
all this is a little bit of a side. So, you know, we've opened up on the rooftop there. We are a little bit early. You know, Paddington is an up and coming area. There's more operators that are going in there, led very much from by Paddington Square and the city, you know, the local council is also making, you know, great investment there as well. So it's a tough market. You know, it's a very, very competitive market, difficult to find, you know, good people because, you know, they are, well, difficult to keep good people because, you know, there's always something new that comes along. You know, it's one of those vibrant cities and people like to go to the new venues. We are still one of those new venues. But we've got a great management team there. You know, we've developed our modern Asian concept. The design is beautiful. I don't know if you've been inside yet, but you know, the design is a beautiful one done
Stunning.
by Prospect Design, who do all of our work. They're based out of the UAE. So it's not been without its challenges because of location and convincing people to go over there. But you know, the business has been, you know, on a steady rise. For anybody that hasn't been up there, they are the most extraordinary views of London. So I love London as well, and I've been to, you know, several rooftops. But I never realized until I sat on top of Paddington Square how large and beautiful Hyde Park is. It
Mm.
is just enormous. So we have this beautiful green view, low-rise buildings over Paddington, and a view of the city as well. So it's really quite something. Even Londoners themselves, you know, come in, you know, are awestruck and take photos saying, "I've never seen my city from quite this angle." So. Um, I think that we're going to have a very, very strong summer. You know, we're very excited about the prospects because we got a great outdoor area, and the team is really settling in well. And you know, we've had some very good reviews at this point in time. So, you know, the business is coming. We're not where we want to be at this point in time, but you know, we've got a new GM on board there, and you know, he's very driven, very knowledgeable, knows what he's doing, and you know, I feel that within the next couple of months, we're going to be exactly where we want to be. So we've got our foothold in Europe, and we hope to build from there. And we hope that you guys will be able to help us with that recruitment process as well.
Well, we'll be very happy to, Harry. Thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with all of the openings. We should probably do one of these next year and do a little Miami, Belgrade kind of like,
Yes.
comparison and kind of
Yes,
like see how
let's. I'll
things
tell
are.
you about Belgrade and Miami. I may eat my words there, but I'm sure that there'll be some additional learnings from that as well. Thank you very much
Absolutely.
for your time today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Take care. Bye.